Hi, everyone. If you can switch your cameras on and your mics, and let's just get acquainted. I see Danae is still needing to connect the audio. Are Andrea and Rene able to open their
Okay.
mics? Hey, Rene.
Hello.
How's it?
Good, and you?
Good, thanks. Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
He's still waiting on Danae.
I'll organize my desk quickly.
Okay. Danae is struggling, I see.
Struggling with the connection there. I'll just type her a message quick.
So,
I would have thought, sorry,
Rene?
I would have thought COVID would teach me about virtual meetings, but I still have challenges.
You know, as a friend of mine once said years ago, she says, if you make a mistake, don't worry. It's a life lesson. And if you don't learn it the first time, life will send you the lesson again. Oh dear. Okay, so listen, while we're starting, just the format of this is intended to be a workshop. Please ask questions. Maybe we can start by each of you just saying which of the designations you're looking at. Rene, do you want to go first?
Just the basic. I haven't been in a. I have been in the industry for a while. Just the beginning stages.
You're looking at the practitioner designation.
Yeah, just.
You're looking at the practitioner. And Andrea, what are you looking at?
Yeah, the same for me. I think it was technician, it said. I'm not sure what the difference is.
Yeah, from my side, sorry to interrupt again. I just want to see which would be most suitable for me where I am.
So let's talk a little bit about that to begin with. You know, the designations are focused around the work that you do. Okay. Now you get the designation because you're doing something effectively. That's the beginning and the end of it. So if you are doing work that is primarily administration in origin, so you're the person who is compiling in the background, who's compiling the information for reporting, capturing learner data onto a system, maybe negotiating or ensuring that learning material is available for the facilitator, checking what the assessor does, making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. That administration job is a vital one. And the technician designation is the one that is most useful for that, most appropriate for that. If, on the other hand, you're in the role of implementing learning programs, so you might be the SDF, you might be the L&D manager, you might, hey, Danae, welcome. We're just doing some intros, Danae, so maybe unmute your mic and chat with us. We're just talking about the difference between the two designations. So the practitioner one is really the SDF, maybe the L&D manager, maybe a facilitator, assessor, moderator, that cluster of skills, somebody's actually delivering programs. So if you are in an L&D manager role, then you're probably looking for facilitators and assessors. You're probably chatting to line managers about what their business needs are, making sure that there's a line of sight between what the company is trying to do in terms of its objectives and the learning that's being delivered in the program. You might have administrators who report into you, or you might be doing it on your own. So that's the that's the practitioner designation. The master's designation is somebody who's working more at a strategic level. So this is the person who's probably more likely sitting at a senior level in a larger business. There might be the HR executive, there might be a skills development executive. They're not necessarily directly implementing learning programs, but they might have a team of practitioners, if you like, who are the implementers, and they're offering strategic advice. So they may also then be working at a national level. Montero, hi, welcome. So that's the master designation. I think if I'm understanding correctly, all of you are currently looking at the practitioner designation. Does that still seem correct to you? Still seem most appropriate?
No, I'm not sure actually, because for me, I don't know, I think most people are independent SDFs, but mostly what I found myself doing is just collating the reports. The clients,
Yeah.
the clients that I have, even though you give them the information, I don't know if it's just Durban, but you know, very few actually engage with me actively in terms of, you know, training that they want to do, or they will have people that they have in their business that are providing that information for them. So I'll source and do that kind of thing, but I think I just get the grunt work. So
listen, don't downplay that. You know, as soon as you are working with businesses, you are consulting to them. And that is a practitioner role. The technician role are people who are normally working within a very structured framework with templates under supervision. And as soon as you're working as an independent person, you're not under supervision. You're having to apply your mind to stuff. You have to decide which template to use rather than just implement a template.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, there's a bigger understanding around employment equity. You know, so I will do skills equity and then touch on BEE as well. So it is a consultation role.
Sounds like you're in a practitioner type role.
Okay, so I need to get that changed.
Well, that's easy enough. Notero, please unmute your mic and tell me how I must pronounce your name, because I'm sure I've made a mess.
I'm Noncedo, but you can call me Noni.
Noni. Thank you. I will mess up your name otherwise. Noni, which of the designations are you looking at?
As a skills development practitioner.
As a practitioner. And from what we've been saying now, does that still seem like the appropriate one for you?
I've just joined in now. I was traveling a bit, so I didn't really get much of what has been happening. I've just joined in a few minutes ago.
Okay, so look, very simply, the technician designation is largely targeted at people who are sitting in administration jobs in a skills development environment. The practitioner is a person who's often the SDF or the skills development manager or a facilitator or assessor or moderator. They implement, they're not so much administration, they're implementing. And the master then is somebody who's at a strategic level, either in a larger company, maybe a corporate company, or even, you know, you could also be a master as an independent person. I've got a master designation. I don't work for a corporate, but I'm operating at a strategic level. I give advice at a national level and sometimes at an international level. So that's the master designation. But what in the end, you need to make up your own mind. And the best way to do it is to look at the designation description. Now we're going to, go through this workshop, we're going to pick the practitioner designation as it's probably most relevant to all of you. But you can look at the other two designations once we're done and see if you think there's a better fit. And as we go through, you'll work out which are the questions you should ask yourself to help you decide which is the most appropriate one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to suggest that you put off your cameras because people will often have bandwidth problems. I'll switch off my camera, but please, if you have comments or questions, don't wait till the end. At that time, please just ask the question. All right, so let me share my screen with you. Oh, and I must just that's not going to work. Hang on, I don't know how quite to do this. Let me do it the other way around. Bear with me. Stop the video, and then I'll share the screen. Okay, so this is just a little bit about so that you understand how the evaluation process works. Firstly, if you've been with the ASDSA a while, I'm not sure many of you have, but some of you may have, we did have a process that we began in 2016. It's the first version of our process. The process that we're working on now has been changed from that earlier version because that earlier process was difficult, was cumbersome, it was very admin intensive. And we found that, in fact, people who were pretty skillful struggled with the process. So, the process needed to change because you shouldn't exclude people because your process is too difficult. What's also happened is that since that process was originally designed in 2016, there are quite a few more new professional bodies that have come on stream. And that's given us an opportunity to do a bit more benchmarking of our processes against what other people are doing. And that's helped us then refine how we go about it. So what we have now is a much more focused and a much simpler process. Simpler from the point of view of yourselves in putting together a portfolio of evidence, and also simpler for the evaluator who needs to process the information that you give them. And then the last thing that we've done is we've also done some work to harmonize the 3 designation descriptions that we've got registered with SAQA. Now, the designation descriptions have been accepted by SAQA. We're waiting on them to update their website with the latest version. But if you go to our website, when you look under designations, you'll see that the updated versions are on our website. And those are the ones that you need to look at in terms of that. That's actually your first port of call, is to look at the designation descriptions, each of them, and say, which of them seems to describe the job that I do best? So look at the versions on our website to help you do that. Okay. Then our new process, it focuses on the designation description. And if you look at the designation description, and I'll come to that in a moment, it goes to the competency description in each designation. Now, let me show you an example. So this is the practitioner designation description. And I'm going to go through all of it. Firstly, it says you need to have at least a level 5 qualification with a minimum of 120 credits in a field related to education, training, learning and development, HR development, HR or business consulting and advising. So that's the first requirement. Cognate means we don't tell you a specific qualification because there could be a number of qualifications that qualify you. If you look at how it's described there, there's a range of qualifications that might be relevant. And that's what cognate means. It says it must be in a field that's related to our area. Secondly, you must have at least 5 years experience in the field. And it must be in the fields of business consulting or skills development, okay? You must have you must be able to submit evidence of successful implementation of planned learning and development. Now that could be internally in the business, or it could be to one of the seaters. Okay. The third thing you must have is that you must be able to give us confirmation from some credible person that you know what you're doing. Now that could be your manager, or it could be a senior person, and if you're part of a larger business, a senior person in that business, or it could be a client if you're an independent skills development professional, and they need to confirm that you are competent in this field. So that's the starting point. And then in addition to that, we want you to tell us, give us examples against each of those 5 designation competencies at the bottom. So if you look at them, firstly, develop and maintain a skills development and training strategy. Secondly, is to actually facilitate implementation of the strategy. Thirdly, is to maintain a quality management system. Fourthly, it's to facilitate career development. And fifthly, it's to provide business performance consulting and advising for appropriate skills development strategies. Now, if you think about what that's talking about, that's the role of a skills development manager or an SDF. That's probably your best, in fact, this screen is probably your best guide. If these things seem familiar to you, if this is what you do already, then this is probably the most appropriate designation for you. And you can go to one of the other designations, you'll see there's a very similar set of descriptions and compare them and see which of them seems most appropriate for you. Okay, so that's what I mean by designation competence. Secondly, we're going to ask you to give examples from your own working experience against those competency descriptions. And then we'll want you to back it up with evidence. And Varks, and I'll talk a bit about that little bit later on. It's basically the assessing guidelines. It must be valid, authentic, reliable, etc., current, and what's the third one? The last one, I can't remember offhand. So we're saying to you, give us some examples and then give us evidence that this actually took place. And lastly, it allows cognitive qualifications, and we've spoken about that. Okay, cognitive qualification is cognitive qualification has been around a while, that term. The earliest reference I found it from SAC was in 2007, but it's a globally accepted term for cognitive, so it's not scary and new. A question often arises that somebody says, listen, I'm doing the job, but I actually don't have, if you're looking at a practitioner, I don't have a level 5, a cognitive level 5 qualification. That's not necessarily a problem. If you don't have a qualification, but you do have the experience, then we can take you through an RPL exercise that allows us to waive the requirement that you have that qualification. It doesn't give you the qualification. That would be a completely different RPL and much more extensive. But this just allows us to waive the requirement if you don't have a cognitive qualification at the right level, but you do have the experience. Is anybody in that situation? Okay, all good. So what is the process? Say again? Everybody
I would look at the RPL for myself.
Sorry, who's speaking?
It's Renee, sorry.
Renee. Okay, cool, Renee. We'll come back to you about that at a later time.
Andy?
Okay, yes.
Sorry, it's Andrea.
Yes.
I have a problem kind of that's the opposite way around, because like I said earlier, I've got the qualifications and stuff, and I provide the solutions to the employer, but I don't know that I can prove that they've actually picked it up and run with it, because
okay, and that's a very good question.
Yeah, so it's because the decisions are not mine. Okay, so if you're coming there, it's fine.
Come back.
Okay, thank you.
Because the example that you're describing is very, very typical for people in your position. You know, this is an RPL exercise. And one of the difficulties with RPL is that you're going to go and have to think back to something that you would have done 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And at the time, you didn't think to collect evidence. It wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
Now you want the evidence. How do you do that?
Yeah, so that's my problem.
Yeah, the simple answer is that you're probably going to need to ask some people who were there at the time to give you some testimonials.
Okay.
So we're going to talk a bit more about it in a moment. Okay, so the process itself, there are 2 key documents. There's a guidelines document, and I think you've probably had access to that already from Angelique, which gives you all the instructions. And we're going to go through that guideline document now. And that's in a PDF. And then there is a document in Word, a workbook in Word. And that is a place for you then to put together your portfolio. So this is where you're going to write down the examples that you're going to give to us, plus you're going to link them to the substantiating evidence. So that's the Word document. Okay, a few more slides to go through, and then we can have a look at these documents themselves. So firstly, what do? Essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to complete the workbook with the examples, and you're going to submit it to us electronically. We don't take anything in hard copy. You must please submit everything electronically. Angelique will have already given you a link to a folder in Dropbox. Please don't lose that link, because you're going to need to use that link on a repeated basis to upload information. And if you put it elsewhere in Dropbox, it creates endless havoc and difficulties. So please don't lose the link. And if you've already lost it, please let Angelique know. She'll resend it to you. So that's where it's going to go, into Dropbox. You're also going to upload any supporting evidence into that same folder in Dropbox. Please, just some guidelines for the evidence that you upload. Don't make all of your evidence into one massive PDF file with maybe 300 pages. It becomes very difficult then for the evaluator to go and find the evidence you're referring to. make sure that each piece of evidence is in a separate file, and make sure that each file has a unique name. And we'll talk a bit about the name convention that we want you to use. But essentially, we want you to give each piece of evidence its own number and then a unique name. And that makes it very easy for you to cross-reference it and for the evaluator to find it. And obviously it goes into Dropbox. It's typically a PDF, but it could include other data. You may have a video of something, or you may have an audio recording. You could also use those as evidence. Mostly we find that people submit a PDF document. And you'll find there's a place to list in the workbook all the evidence that you've got, and then later on you map, for each example that you give, you map just the evidence for that example at the example. Right. So starting point for you is to review your designation description and choose a competency. And we've spoken a bit about that already. And in the guideline document, there are some activities that will help you. And we're going to go and look at them in a moment. Evaluator's job is to evaluate your portfolio once you've submitted it. And the evaluator is going to give you both written and verbal feedback. And the verbal feedback is, and this is what we've spoken about already, the question that's been raised is, one, if I don't have appropriate evidence, how can I get it? And the evaluator will guide you on what you might do there. So they'll give you feedback probably around helping you if you don't have enough evidence, or if the example that you've given isn't sufficiently clear. So this is, in a sense, a bit of a mentoring role. They're not going to tell you specifically what to get, but they'll guide you as to the sort of information that you can look for. And this is different to assessing. You know, when you're assessing against typically learning material. And if the assessor gives too much guidance, then you overcoach the learner and you don't actually test whether they've learned something. But in this case, we're doing something different. You know, either you've got the experience or you haven't. It's not something you can go and study. You've either done it or you haven't done it. So, and you need help in identifying what's the right sort of evidence. So included in what you've already paid as a fee is one remedial evaluation. Now everything might be great first time around, and hopefully it is, but if it isn't, the evaluator will give you feedback and you'll get another opportunity to submit either additional information about an example or additional evidence. Okay. If you're still not there and you want a third evaluation, that's possible, but then we would need to charge you some more because obviously there's more work for the evaluator and they need to be paid. So once the evaluator is done, it goes to a verifier, and the verifier's job is much like a moderator or with qualifications, is to check what the evaluator has done and to give feedback on that. So there are some checks and balances built in. And so once that's done, both of them are happy, then the final recommendation goes to the certification committee, and they're the final judge of this. I'm going to come back to this rubric in more detail, so I'm going to skip this slide. How long does the whole process take? Well, the briefing is actually not one day, it's the session. So it's more like an hour. Then our experience is that it probably will take you a couple of days only to complete the workbook, because you're going to think about and work through some examples. We've got many candidates, in fact, who've taken a weekend to do it. And by Monday morning, they're pretty much there with their workbook. The thing that's missing, and again, we've already spoken about it, is maybe you don't have all that evidence readily to hand and you need a bit more time to get the evidence. So that's why we think maybe then you need 2 weeks. It's a reasonable time frame, I think, to complete this in 2 weeks. We give you more, okay? But we encourage you to put your mind to it. Don't let this thing drag on. If you can sort out your workbook and get it 99% of the way there over a weekend, just needing some additional evidence, do that, because it's easiest to do while it's all fresh in your brain. So as soon as you tell us that you're ready, it goes to the evaluator, and they have 2 weeks to work through it, give you feedback and remediate it. It then goes to the verifier, and they get a week for their job. and then it goes to the certification committee, and that meets monthly. So we reckon from start to finish, we're looking at probably around about 2 to 3 months only, and could be less depending on how quickly you work. What else is in here? I'm not going to go through it. We've spoken about. I'm not going to go through it. And this is in the workbook. So I'm going to leave the presentation and I'm going to go to the guideline document. And this, I think everybody's seen. So I'm using the practitioner because I think that's relevant for most people, but there's a very similar book for everybody else. Now I'm going to move fairly quickly, so just bear with me.
Andy, while you're still looking, I just want to ask about the different colors. So I've submitted twice already, so this is going to be my third time.
Yes.
I've submitted with I did the blue color. What's the next color? So it's purple. So I need to write my feedback in purple.
Oh, I've got a whole thing at the end. Can I leave it until then?
Okay, yeah.
No, wait. Okay. Contents you've seen, this you've seen, the timelines you've seen. How will your POE be evaluated? We've spoken about this. So underlying qualifications, we've spoken about cognitive qualifications. We've spoken about if you don't have a qualification, there's a possibility of RPL. We've spoken about the designation competencies. Curriculum vitae, that is a key document that you should include in your portfolio.
Sorry, Andy, are you sharing your screen?
Oh my word, is it not sharing?
No.
Thanks for alerting me. I was chatting away merrily here. Where is it? Okay. Has it come up? Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
curriculum vitae, I'll come back to that. Okay, so let me just see what that is. Yeah, let's go through this before then. So you've seen the designation competencies for the practitioner a little earlier. There are 5 of them. Here are the minimum requirements. So this is the guideline that you need to meet. You must provide evidence against at least 75% of the designation competencies above. And that means you must provide evidence against at least 4 of those 5 designation competencies. Okay, and you must provide at least 8 specific examples. So it's 8 examples across at least 4 of the 5. That's the requirement, and it must be over a period of at least 5 years. So that's the first guideline that you need to bear in mind. Is everybody familiar with assessing? Is it new for anybody?
No, it's not new for me.
Okay. So then I'm not going to go through these VARCS requirements. These are very similar. It's that, whatever the evidence you supply must be valid, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but you can read in turn. Okay. So what we've said to you is that for each of those designation competencies, you need to give an example. Or you need to, in fact, give a couple of examples. So you're going to need to look back over your working experience and identify an instance where you say, hang on, here's an example of me being pretty competent in doing this. And we're going to ask you then to explain the example. So question number 1 is, what is the example that you will use? Noni, you've got a question?
Just a quick question. In terms of examples, I'm almost done with my POE, but
Yes.
the examples that I've used are only the most recent ones. Is that okay? Because those are the ones that are fresh on my mind.
That's cool. As long as your CV shows that you've been in those roles over at least 5 years, it meets the requirement.
Okay. Another question, just the last one.
Yes.
In terms of evidence, I'm sitting with a dilemma. I'm in a space where there is so much of a, I don't know how to explain this, but it's not quite easy to get company information out there. There are processes, a very long process actually, to get an approval to use such documents
Okay.
for me to share with the external people.
Absolutely.
So
I
now my dilemma is that in terms of the timelines that are there, it's gonna take me a while to get those approvals. So what else can one get? Is it because also some of this information has people's details on it. Like for instance, if I must use a WSP or ATR, that
absolutely
entails.
there's two things. There are two things that you can do, and I'll show you some examples a bit later on. One is you can redact evidence. In fact, you need to redact evidence that you submit, because obviously nobody can submit personal information about anybody else. So you've got to redact that, okay? And I'll show you in the example a little bit later on how it's been redacted is the one thing. The second thing is actual evidence might be very difficult to find. So you might need to rely on testimonials from credible people in the organization. Now, if you're asking somebody to confirm, and I'll come back to that when in fact, if you don't mind, hold that question. Let me go through the example, and then we can talk around how you can get evidence via testimonial to support that. Can you hang on for a moment? I'll come back to it. I promise you I won't lose it. So what you need to do is give us the example to describe the circumstances surrounding your example, the context or situation where it arose. Explain what you did. Okay, what was your personal role? Explain why it's a good example of your competence, and then give us some evidence to back it up. So that's essentially what we're asking you to do. Why is this? Let me just go down this way. Okay, so this is what in red is what the evaluator is going to be using. So firstly, qualifications. They must be certified within the past 6 months. Obviously, they must be at the right level, etc., etc. CV. The CV must provide details of position, titles, dates, job responsibilities, and here in enough detail to understand what processes and results you were responsible for, and employers over the period required for the designation. Now, why I say that is often if you look at the CV, it'll say, I was responsible for supervision, and I was responsible for administration, and I was responsible. That actually doesn't give enough information to understand what exactly you were supervising, etc., and so on. So you need to explain you might need to expand your current CV to make sure it's very clear exactly what the processes and results were that you were responsible for. Then the experiential learning, and we'll talk now, this is a particular case in point about testimonials. Submission of evidence of successful implementation. So if it's an internal strategy, then we need to know that it's been accepted by the organization, and that there's a line of sight between what the organization is trying to do in the skills development. And a statement to this effect signed by the person responsible for implementation will be sufficient evidence. Now, it may be difficult for them to understand exactly what to put into the testimonial, because there's some specific requirements if you're going to use a testimonial. So what I encourage you to do is that you should draft whatever you want them to put into the testimonial to make sure that it actually covers in enough detail what you want them to confirm. So you need to draft it yourself, I think. They must obviously sign it, and they're not going to sign something if it's not true. So it needs to be signed, maybe it's on a letterhead or something like that. But I suggest wherever you have a difficulty getting this sort of evidence, because it might be, organization strategies may be very confidential and so on and so forth. Rather than get a credible person to give you a testimonial instead and use that as your evidence. If it's a workplace skills plan, then that should be fairly straightforward, because if you can get confirmation from the relevant CETA that it's been accepted, that's usually not a sensitive piece of information to get. But please, the important point here is it can't just be that the CETA confirms you submitted it. That won't be seen as sufficient evidence. The evidence must be that it's been accepted by the CETA. And then lastly, a recommendation. And again, this is a testimonial. Now look at that last line. It must confirm in the opinion of this person that the candidate is competent against at least 4 of the 5 designation competencies of this designation. Now, if you're going to get a testimonial like that, you actually have to list those competencies in the testimonial. Otherwise, the evaluator will say, but it's not clear enough. So that's why I say to you, please, I strongly recommend that you draft the testimonial so that it actually spells out what you want it to say. Does it make sense? Everybody good? Okay. Then, so you'll see that in the workbook, there's a place to write these examples. Now, this is how the evaluator is going to evaluate what evidence you supply. So question number 1 is a particular example. Let's say it's about implementing a training program. This is an example that you're going to give. So in that white space there where it says, what is the example, candidate explanation, that's where you would be writing you'll explain your example. You might say that in 2019, I delivered a leadership program to 23 leaders in our organization, and comprised of 7 modules. These were the modules, and I was responsible for facilitating the program and assessing the program. Now, what the evaluator will do then is award 1 point if the description provides clear and unambiguous information about the context. It must clearly explain what needed to be done, what result was required, who the key role players were, and so on, and should link to one of the positions on the CV. And if all of that, if your explanation covers all of that, you get a point. Then the second question is, how does your action in the situation show your competence? So describe what role you played, what action you took. Give enough information so it is clear what you personally did. So here you might be saying, I delivered all 5 of the programs, of the workshops, and I assessed, it was against this unit standard, and I assessed all of them. And I produced an assessment report to the moderator. Evaluator feedback award 1 point if this example of the activities undertaken by the candidate is relevant to this competency. Okay, so this must be that second one, which is about implementing. Award 1 point if there is good and clear explanation of the role played by the candidate. If the candidate is a member of a team, then the role played by the candidate or the responsibilities they were held accountable for must be clearly outlined. Now, this is quite important. For example, if you are the STF in a mid-sized organization, and so you might have a team of administrators reporting to you, so you won't be doing the data gathering for the mandatory grant report. Your administrators do that. You, however, are responsible for the work that they do, and you oversee it. So that's the role that you should describe. Question number 3, why is this a good example of your competence? Describe the outcome and the results obtained because of your actions. Explain why you believe this is good evidence of your personal competence. So here you might be saying something like, of the 23 people, I got very good feedback in terms of a happiness rating of the program, and 23 out of the 23 were assessed as competent. What the evaluator will do, award 1 point if there is a successful outcome because of the role played personally by the candidate. Description of the outcome should include an outline of impact on the organization that is supported by evidence. And award 1 point if the outcome shows that candidate is competent against the competency description. Okay, and there's a maximum of 2 points. So you'll see across these 3 questions, you can get 5 points. Now, what will happen is if you're not clear enough on one of these, and you don't have the minimum number of points that you should have, then the evaluator is going to come back to you as part of the remedial and say, listen, Andy, please expand on this. Your role isn't clear enough. I didn't understand it. Or you haven't explained clearly what the results were. Why was it a successful outcome? Just expand on that. So that's the one thing that the evaluator may come back to you on. Now, if you have got 5 points, then the evaluator will go on and look at the evidence. And now the evidence must actually support your story. It can't just be a make-up story. There must be evidence that you actually did this thing. So the list of evidence should include evidence relevant. It must meet VARC's requirements. Now, the evidence could include minutes of meetings. If your role is clearly described, it could be a testimonial of a candidate's role. or the successful outcome of their actions, and so on and so forth. And here you would list the evidence, just the evidence that's relevant to this particular example. And at the end, and excuse me if I flick down, I've got an example just to show you. So with me, don't get motion sick while I move to the end. Come on. Okay, so here's an example. This is it's an actual client of mine, and they're at McSeater. So I've redacted the company information. And you can see it's 2019, and this is the approval letter received from McSeater for 2019. And then on the next page, it's a 2020, similar. And then I've included minutes of they call it a skills meeting, because they need a skills development committee. You'll see I've redacted the invitees, but my name is still there. You can see the date of the meeting. You can see welcome. You can see that it was a review of the plan. You can see my role has been spelled out. And you can see that the meeting accepted. Okay. And that was the 2020 meeting. And then there's also the 2019 meeting. It's a similar report. So, redact because you can't, POPIA doesn't allow us to share personal information. So redact as you need to do. Okay, so that's the sort of evidence, and it doesn't necessarily have to be lots and lots of evidence. It must be just enough evidence to confirm the explanation, and that example is a little earlier on as well. So here's the example. It's submitting a manual grant report, and you've probably seen this. I'm not going to go through it, but it's to substantiate this. So there's not lots of evidence, just key relevant information to confirm the role played. Okay, happy. Okay, I'm going to sit back, see what else is in here. So we've seen this, Okay. There is an appeal process. If you find that it gets through to verification, the verifier says, upholds an evaluator decision that you're not yet competent, you haven't yet supplied enough evidence, and you think they're wrong, you have an appeal opportunity. There is an appeal process. It's at that point in time that you then say, hang on, I'd like another evaluator to look at this because I think they've made a mistake. If we'll appoint a new evaluator. If the new evaluator agrees with you, then there's no charge for that. If, however, they disagree with you and they agree with the original evaluator, then you have to pay for that process. So there is an appeal process. Organizing your portfolio. This is quite an important bit. Please, here's an example of what you need to do when you are naming your evidence. So you'll see that in that little block there, for example, each piece of evidence has been given a unique name and a unique number, and it's just numbered 1 to whatever. Okay. There are a couple of appendices to this that can be helpful. The competency description is, Noni, I think you asked this. Here is the guideline as to what color you must use. So when you submit it in a Word document and you just type it, it's probably going to be in black ink. The evaluator will then go through your workbook and they will make any comments in red. Okay. When they have finished, they'll save their evaluated document into PDF so that we have a snapshot of this first evaluation. If you need to do remedial, the Word document will go back to you, and then you need to submit new information or additional information into the Word document. Please do it in blue so we can see the difference. Then the remedial will be done in purple by the evaluator, and they'll again save this in PDF so we have a second snapshot of the remediated workbook. It then goes to the verifier, and the verifier will work in green. So you can see everybody's different part in the process. And once they've done, they again save it in PDF, the workbook in PDF. So we have a third snapshot So we can see all the way through what work's been done by which person. So just bear that in mind if you don't mind. Does that answer the question? Noni, was it you?
No, it was me. So it was Dineo. So
Dineo.
I submitted the first time and I bulleted my explanations. So I had to submit again with the full explanation in terms of what my capabilities were as per the questions and answers.
Yeah.
And then I was told that, which is true, I'm not denying, that my numbering was incorrect. It didn't line up with the information I was given. So now I need to submit the third time with where I have to correct my numbering. But now I want to know what color am I writing in?
Listen, I don't think we must worry too much about the numbering, the coloring of the numbering. The key thing is, often people submit 50, 60 pieces of evidence. And it becomes very difficult then to, work out which goes with which is why we are so anal about insisting that you use our naming convention, which is to give every piece of evidence a unique number and then a unique title. So it makes sense to it's as long as the workbook and the evidence, and so how you've named it in the workbook and how you've named it in the evidence, that must tie up. So you might need to go in and do that. So you're doing it as a third time. Is that what your question is?
Yes, so I'm resubmitting for the third time, but this time I'm correcting the numbering and like you're saying, the naming of the evidence. So I'm one of those people that's getting everything in one document.
I think you must just choose a new color. I don't have a provision in my process for it, but maybe choose orange or something like that, something that will make it just stand out.
All right, noted, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So that's that. The designation description is there. Not going to spend time on that. You've seen that. I don't think this is necessarily relevant to you. It can be helpful. We did a mapping exercise a while ago to say, if we look at our designations, are there obvious OFO codes that link in? And if it was obvious, we put it in green. And if it was less obvious, we put it in yellow. So that maybe you need to think about that. It depends on what your CV looks like. So practitioners, if you're looking at any of these titles, it's probably the practitioner designation that you want. And if it's any of the ones in yellow, well, then you need to look at your CV to say, is the practitioner the right designation? And so on. There's technician. This can also help you as you're looking at trying to work out, can I think of an example for this particular designation competency, develop and maintain organizational skills development training strategy. We've listed a whole lot of activities that might be a place for an example. You say, oh, number 6, yes, I've done training needs analysis, so maybe I can use that as an example. And number 8, liaison with CETAs. Yeah, I do that. So maybe I can find an example there. It'll help you, I think, try and identify some examples. So that's the purpose of that. Great, so that's the guideline document. Are there any questions?
Okay, I've just got one more question.
Sure.
If, let's say, I complete my whole portfolio, submit, and then through the evaluation process, then the examples that I've made and the evidence that I've provided, though I had indicated that I want to apply for a practitioner designation, if according to the people that are going to assess the portfolio, they feel, let's say, actually the evidence that has been provided and the examples actually fall, let's say, in a higher designation than the one that I've indicated that I want to apply for, do they come back and say, we've looked at your evidence and we feel you are at this level? Even if it's the opposite, let's say the evaluators feel that maybe this could be a technician instead of a practitioner. Does that happen?
It could happen. I think it's not very often that it would happen, because if you look at the designation competencies in each of the 3 designations, they're quite different work. So if you look, what may happen is that you say, okay, I'm working at a practitioner level, but maybe I don't have enough experience as a practitioner. And maybe I need to go and get more exposure to, for example, quality management system. Maybe I don't get involved in the quality management system. And I want to use an example there. Or I've just touched on it, but I don't have very much experience in it. That's the more likely scenario. They come back and say, listen, you need more workplace experience in this before we can give you the designation. It's less likely that they'll say you're actually operating at a technician level. Because you'll know that when you look at the sort of evidence, there are not many people who kind of stuck halfway between a technician and a practitioner. Mind you, I suppose there could be. But more often, I think in business, what happens is that you get promoted from being an administrator, you get promoted into a more senior position, and then you got that job. I think that's the more likely scenario. But certainly, I mean, one of the things the evaluator will say to you is if they think that you need more exposure, more experience, they will tell you. And if they think that you probably already meet the requirements for a technician, but not yet the requirements for a practitioner, they will tell you that, and they'll guide you as to what to do to complete that portfolio. Luni, does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
We've got not much time left, so I'm going to quickly go through the workbook. I think a lot of the information we've probably spoken about. So it's in Word. Your stuff goes to the top. You've seen there, we've seen this. You've seen this. Okay, so here, right at the beginning of the workbook, we ask you to list all of the evidence that you're going to submit. And as you go through the examples, add in to this list. So you wind up at the beginning of your document with a comprehensive list of all of your evidence. That's actually helpful for you as well, because then you can quickly go and see where the evidence is that you want to link in for a particular example. We've already put some numbers in here for you to use. Then this you've seen, the designation competencies. Here, where it says qualification, you must put in the specific document name. And that comes from that earlier table. The CV, it must have the document name of your CV, see the earlier table. And again, so you're filling in the white bits, this evaluator is filling in the gray bits, and they're making a final comment on the right-hand side. So they'll go through all of that stuff. And please, this mapping is vital. If you don't do the mapping, linking back to your evidence, the evaluator is going to throw it back at you. This you've seen. Okay, so here's the first example. So you'll see that there's provision in this workbook for you to give up to 10 examples. If you need to do more, you could, but you should be fine with 10. In fact, the minimum requirement is, I think, 8 examples. You'll see for each of the competencies, there are 5 competencies, you can do 2 examples if you want to. And we've actually been through this. You've seen there's a place in white for you to type, evaluator to make their feedback and to give a rating. Okay, so this is competency A, example 2, and then it goes on to competency B, example 3, and so on and so forth. So let me move quickly down. Forgive me racing, I hope you don't get motion sick. Okay. There is a declaration of authenticity that you must sign and commit to, okay? And probably what you need to do is to sign this page, scan it, and then upload it as a scanned document. So it doesn't, I wouldn't want to be signing a Word document electronically because it's too easy to rip off your signature. So I would suggest to you that you sign it and then scan it and upload it. I hereby declare the evidence I've submitted as work I've completed personally or have been directly responsible for. I have not submitted any evidence that I was not responsible for and that was completed by someone else. I understand that if it is found that I submitted work that I have not completed personally or been directly responsible for, I will be subject to a disciplinary inquiry. And the consequences could be that you no longer can be a member and you get denied the possibility of getting a designation. So it's important. One of the key things in a professional body is ethical behavior, and you'll see that you've already signed the code of conduct. We take it seriously. If you were at, I think, our AGM, we mentioned that we do hold disciplinary inquiries where complaints are made. It's a vital role to be played by a professional body, and we take it seriously. Okay, extended candidacy. So if you don't have enough experience, so for example, the evaluator looks and says, listen, you need to go, for example, that quality management system, you need a couple more months of exposure to that. They will then spell it out with you. They'll help you identify some sort of a plan, what you need to do. Key contacts, often if you want to get work experience, you've got to go and ask somebody to allow you the opportunity. So who is that person? And how long do you think it might take you to do that? So that's the purpose of this table. And lastly, then you can then say, well, my game plan then is I need to come back to you in 3 months or whatever the case may be, just so that there's a proper plan that's clear. And the end bit is for the evaluator and the verify to complete. So don't worry about this, but this is where they tally up what's been accepted, what's not been accepted. Is the first evaluation is remedial, and then they sign it off here. So that's my story. Questions? Please tell me that you're feeling a little bit more clear as to what you need to do and how to do it. Yes, go ahead.
One more question from my side. I worked in 2020, I worked for another company. I finished off end of February this year.
Yes.
But when I left, I committed that I'm gonna compile and finish off the ATR for the year for them, and also the WSP. So I still continued and did that for them in March. Then there's a communication between me and the company liaison person. Then once I completed the CSV files to be uploaded on the CETA system, I then emailed the file back to the person who must upload it, the new SDF for the company. But I did the work for them. But the actual submission was not done by me. Yes, the previous year was done by me, but then this year's work wasn't done by me, but I still completed and did everything for them. But their emails.
Can you get a testimonial to confirm that? Because that could be good evidence.
Okay. Can I also include those emails?
You could do. For me, the key thing would be if I was evaluating, I would want a very clearly written testimonial to say what role you played and how it was passed on to somebody else, but they were just implementing what you'd done. Draft it carefully, so it very clearly explains what role you played and why you, and why you see yourself as the person who was responsible for ensuring it was accepted by the CETA.
Okay.
And get somebody credible at that organization to testify to that. Get to sign off that testimonial, and then it's good evidence.
All right, great. Thank you.
Any other questions, Renee or Andrea?
Nothing from me. Thanks, Andy.
Sorry.
Sorry, Renee.
Sorry, Andrea. Yeah, also nothing from me. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Guys, listen, if later on you got questions, please, the role of the evaluator is to guide. We are aware that this is not as simple as assessing a portfolio after a training program. You're delving back into ancient history. So the evaluators are very aware of that, and they will help you, they will guide you if you have questions. Not only the sort of questions that you're asking, you feel free to ask similar questions to your evaluator because they will guide you. We are aware that this is not an easy exercise to do. It's RPL, or in this case, it's RPE, recognizing previous experience.
So Andy, who's our evaluator? Will we know ahead of time or not?
You will know ahead of time. As soon as you've done your portfolio, that's when we allocate the evaluator, and Angelique will then communicate that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, guys?
Nothing from my side.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. And I'm going to wish you a very good end of year.
Thanks, Andy. The recording will be available on YouTube if you want to have a look at it.
Oh, great.
As well.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.